de Graaf. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd like to move a motion, please. Go ahead. Okay, I've got, I'm not sure whether this is an alternative motion, but I think it's probably not. So I'm just going to try this. It's instead of number 1, what I've got here is that the original recommendations as written by Adrian Scull be used, and that the system is monitored for a further 3 months to see whether any further changes may be required, such as the extra recommendations put forward by staff or elected members. So, and I'll just remove that "the." So instead of saying any further changes, there was a "the" in there. Oh, where am I? So I'm just going to recap. To see whether any further changes may be required, such as extra recommendations. So not the extra recommendation. Yep, perfect. Okay, and then number 2 is that the 10-day period service standards are set to 10 business days. So just to use that same text that we had there already. And then number 3, that Adrian Scull be invited back to do a recap and review of the EM inquiry system in 1 year. And then number 4, that mayoral correspondence be treated with the same transparency levels of all elected members. So, and that's specifically to do with number 2 there. So what was up there originally was note the administration process and privacy issues concerning mayoral correspondence. So I'm not sure whether I need to adjust number 4 in any way to make that line back in with that, but it's just to say for all elected members to be, come under the same banner there. So just, I think that summarises it. So if I could speak to that, please, I'd like to explain. Thank you.
Were you waiting for Councillor de Graaf? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Clock's going. All right. I've got a bit to get through here. Okay. This report by Adrian Scull speaks of extremely important things within our council, like transparency and equity. The council and staff all recognised this, and staff initiated a report that cost the council $15,000, where Mr. Adrian Scull was hired to do a review of the EM inquiry system, noting that Adrian Scull is the ex-CEO of Enquiry and also the ex-CEO of the City of Marion. At present, Mr. Scull's recommendations currently listed on page 216 to 220 of our agenda include several items that say the action will be addressed by the CEO and the Mayor for discussion. I feel this should be a more inclusive process, perhaps held at regular transparent communication workshops that involves all councillors and not just the Mayor and CEO to have that discussion. I've got some more notes here. Now, I will point out that what I read out before was an email that we were all sent by the Onkaparinga Council Watch. I didn't read out a motion before, and I'm not reading out a motion now. So this is part of my debate, obviously. So they made a comment as well, and I want to read that out because it's not just one person. That's actually a group who are a council watch who are supposed to be keeping an eye on transparency. So I think it's actually, what they say is relevant, in a lot of cases. So tonight's council agenda gives us some insight into issues within communication, within.
Can you press your button, please, Councillor Jamieson, and clarify what your point of order is?
We're getting this is from an outside source, the Onkaparinga Council Watch. We know where we've been there, and it seems to me inappropriate that Onkaparinga Council Watch are dictating or pushing the council in this forum, in the actual chamber. And they're not invited. So.
I acknowledge your concern, Councillor Jamieson, but it's not a point of order, I'm afraid. You can continue, Councillor de Graaf.
Okay, thank you very much. So I was at 2 minutes 32 there. So would you be able to restart?
You can have an extra minute. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so there's only a small amount here that the council watch have written in. I spent quite a bit of time writing up something on this. So these are my views, and I find that quite offensive, but I think the views of other people are important to hear too. After several workshops on how councillors communicate with council staff, a private consultant was engaged to undertake an independent review of the EM Enquiry system. The system is a tool used by elected members when logging complex resident action requests or seeking other information in relation to their role as councillor. The current practice with actioning resident ratepayer concerns through an elected member sees such inquiries become accessible to all members, including the Mayor. However, the Mayor's correspondence and inquiries as an elected official to undertake the role are not made available to elected members. Now, I will correct that statement there because the Mayor is in the EM Enquiry system, and that was something that was addressed and has been changed, so they're not quite correct there. Elected members have sought transparency and disclosure of mayoral correspondence and inquiries as part of this ongoing review. We have identified three main areas of concern with what's before Council's tonight meeting, and I thought people might find this of interest. Mayoral correspondence, Council staff sought legal advice regarding the release of all incoming and outgoing mayoral correspondence to elected members. The report states, due to privacy concerns and in particular concerns around the undisclosed sharing of personal details and authors and letters being unaware their correspondence will be shared, the advice is that staff are unable to share all incoming and outgoing mayoral correspondence. The lawyers, with members, that is. The lawyers' advice also expressed concerns that in many cases the review of much of the Mayor's correspondence may not be a proper discharge of a member's civic duties. Their question of concern is this legal advice regarding correspondence not applicable to all elected member correspondence? And that's why my motion says that, because I don't think it should be one rule for the Mayor and then a different rule for other elected members. How can the Mayor's correspondence and inquiries have legal implications due to confidentiality and disclosure of personal details, yet other elected officials' correspondence is treated differently? I just
think that's your extra minute. Do you want to wrap up?
Is that the extra minute? Yes. Yeah, I will wrap up. Thank you. Can you give me an extra 30 seconds to wrap up? Thank you. So I've got some real concerns that Adrian Scull's recommendations haven't been accepted. Like virtually none of his recommendations have been accepted. It says in there that if an elected member has put forward a question and it's not in scope, then that question won't be asked and they have to take that back to the council. So yet in scope is not defined. And I've got several examples here where I've actually asked questions and then told that they would need to be put forward as a motion. And I've just got lots of examples where that is really, really problematic. Look, we paid $15,000 to get Adrian to come in and do this review. I think we at least need to follow his recommendations and then do a further review with him. I'm really hoping you support this. It's very important.
Councillor Olsen, are you wishing to second the motion?
Certainly not, Mayor, but I flag if there's a want of a seconder, I'd like to put a motion up, please.
Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Brown, do you wish to speak to the motion? No, that's all we've said. Councillor Eaton.
I won't be seconding it, but I had some other issues, and that I have a draft motion, but it talks about the 24-hour time frame that we get responses from staff when we lodge it. Clearly, that doesn't meet the needs of a matter going in on a Friday, because I'm certainly sure that staff aren't going to be around there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon of Saturday. And what I was going to suggest that those timeframes actually be pushed out to the close of the next working day. So I won't be supporting this one. Thank you.
Councillor McMahon.
Well, here we go again. It gets even more incredible now. This is actually quite outstanding. What we have, dot point 1 here, actually makes a bit of sense. Let's go to the original recommendation by Adrian Scull. We paid $15,000. There's credibility to that, number one. Fair enough. But to not listen to our officers, other elected members have had input to this, is a bit of a kick in the face, considering that we're going to say we need to go to option 1 and honour the report, honour what Adrian Scull said, throw away everything else. But now we're going to also include other people's things from outside this chamber, outside of the group, outside of what we've been working for together. It is absolutely astonishing that we can, on one hand, say, no, staff have not done the right thing, go back to the original report, stop putting your own feedback into it. But now I start to put mine, I'll start to alter it. I can't support this.
Councillor Olsen.
I move amendment, please, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Exactly written there, except 2 turns to a 5-day period. Service standards are set to 5 business days. So from 10 to 5.
Do you want to speak to that?
I do, please. Members, look, I'm the same as Councillor McMahon. I'm not going to support this at all. But if it does go through, by chance through the chamber, I don't want to go backwards from 10 days service level to from a 5-day service level, which has actually worked fantastic for the best time I've been here for 10 years, backwards to 10 days. So I'm putting this amendment in the event that perhaps the chamber is going to vote for it. I still won't be voting for it, but I hope you support this amendment anyway to get us back to 5 days. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor O'Brien, do you wish to speak as seconder? There doesn't appear to be any further debate on the amendment. We'll put the amendment to vote. All those in favour? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's a split vote. So I will support the amendment. Councillor de Graaf, do you wish to close debate on the motion as amended? Oh, sorry, before you do, someone beat you to it. Councillor Familiotis? Yeah.
How much is it going to cost to invite Adrian Scull to come back and recap and review the yearly inquiry system in 1 year?
Through the Mayor, we'd need to get a quote from Adrian to do that, but I would suggest it would probably be in a similar ballpark figure.
Sorry, $15,000.
Well, as I said, we need to get a quote. It depends how much work he has to do.
And in a year's time, will this be a new council? Close to? This will be a very fine.
Through you, Mayor Thompson, we'll actually be a month out of caretaker. So October, caretaker will start in September 22. So we're going into election mode.
We'll be going into election mode.
That's correct.
And just one other question. Did Adrian say in his report, and if he did, I missed it, that the benefit would be for him to come back in a year's time and have another crack at it?
No, as far as I'm aware,
Okay.
he didn't include any commentary around that.
Thank you.
Councillor de Graaf, you can close debate now.
Thank you, Mayor. Given what Councillor Themios has said, would I be able to change that 1 year to 9 months? Just so that we're not in caretaker mode? Oh, okay, it's fine. Sorry, Councillor Olsen? No. All right. Okay, can I start my debate from now, please? Thank you very much. I just have some real concerns with this, considering the reason why this elected member inquiry review came up. You know, some things are worth paying for. Transparency is really worth paying for. Now, what it says in here, it talks about repeated questions. It says that if there's a repeated question, you need to stop. But it doesn't actually say whether that repeated question has been answered or not. So if it's a case where that question has been asked before and you can refer back and say that's been answered before, then that makes absolute sense. But in the case of the EM inquiry review, there's something that I was asking for over a year, was that the Mayor's EM inquiries also get put within the EM inquiry system so that we can all see those things. And we all agreed that that was a you know, an important thing to do, and the Mayor also, you know, it couldn't have been done before, but then it was agreed that it would be a really good idea to do it. That was something that had to be asked multiple times. Sometimes you need to be persistent, and if it's about transparency, that's something that's really, really important. It's a pity that some people have spoken against this. We note the only proposed, Council Watch, that they've actually summarised my notes a little bit better, so I'm going to read this out. We note the only proposed recommendations in the Council agenda appear to address the concerns of the 5-day staff turnaround. Now, what Adrian Scull said was that the 10 days would actually give staff a bit of breathing time, and it was recommended to stretch it out to 10 days. And that's why I recommended going for that, although I appreciate what Councillor Olsen's saying there. None of his other recommendations that I can see have even been put in there. So, however, the question remains. I mean, some things are still, you know, they're on the table, they are to be discussed, but it says to be discussed by the CEO and Mayor. And like I said, I don't see why elected members can't be in those discussions. The consultant, changes to the council policy with communication inside the organisation. The policy proposes that council inquiries that are not of strategic importance will not be answered. There's no definition of what has been defined as strategic. It's not known who makes that decision. So say, for example, I will give that example where I asked about, does the council need to do a section 23 for the Whitten Bluff case? I believe that the Aboriginal Heritage Act had been breached. That was considered to be a complex question, and I was told you would need to move a motion to bring it forward so that we can ask the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. You know, there are certain cases where I think that the elected member should be able to just ask their question and not be able to be told that you're not going to get your question answered, and the council are going to decide via a motion whether your question will even be answered. You know, it has the potential to go against the guidelines of the Local Government Act, and I will simply be following the Local Government Act and bringing that up if it presents itself.
There are some inaccuracies in your debate, Councillor de Graaf, and CEO would like to correct the record.
So through the chair, just to correct the record, Councillor de Graaf, you said that almost none of the actions, recommendations of Adrian Scull report have been adopted. I'll draw your attention to page 216, which clearly states the summary of the recommendations and the feedback and actions under the heading actioned. Then turning to page 218, the record shows it's under the heading in progress, and then on page 219, to be considered and investigated, and they are the only recommendations from Adrian Scull's report that are yet to have actually been actioned by council staff. Thank you.
We will put that motion to vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's lost. Someone like to put an alternative? Councillor Olsen?
Thank you, Mayor. As per the original motion, if we could see that again, with the service standards for 5 days, 5 business days. And at the end of number 2, can I put the extra bit, please? So get rid of the full stop and put a comma. However, mayor-led inquiries will utilise the elected member inquiry procedure and be transparent to all elected members, which is, I believe, what's happening now, to putting that out formally.
Would you mind adding as per current practice? So some of
fine. As
these
per current
points
practice, yeah.
suggest that the mayor's office is not being transparent, which is not accurate, and I
no.
find quite offensive.
No, that's...
Thank you, appreciate
It's
it.
just in the procedure, there was nothing mentioning anything about
Yeah.
the mayor
Yep, thank
following
you.
that procedure, that's all.
Yep, you can go ahead and debate.
So members, look, it was interesting getting Adrian here and getting feedback from staff about how the process is working, or the temporary one we put in place, from elected members, how it was working, and as CEO, we implementing a lot of his recommendations. So finally, I think we've got a very good system. In the 10 years I've been here, I'm very happy with it now. I think it's working very well. I think governments are doing a fantastic job at managing the process. The 5 days is, I think, what our residents would expect. A week to get a response back is reasonable. 2 weeks is far too long when a resident comes with some escalated complaint. And that's generally what the complaints are that come to elected members. So I think that 5 days is good. If it's a complex thing, staff have the ability to say, look, this is a little bit more complex. It's going to take us an extra 3 or 4 days. And that's fine. I mean, there's no problems with that, because there are some times when something a bit complex also has to be chased up, and there's no problems with that. So I don't think stuff has to be hard fixed on it. But as a general rule, 80-20%, then we get them in 5 days. And I think, the mayor has come and become transparent now using the elected member system. I can understand partly the correspondence and the privacy around that. Some of those letters probably are private matter. Many probably aren't, because I don't understand if someone writes a letter as opposed to sends an email with their details, how that's a difference in privacy. But I'm happy to take that at face value with the legal advice. And so, look, I hope you'll support this, members, because I think this has been a great step forward, and I think it's a very good procedure at the moment. And we can review it in 12 months' time. I really don't think we need to pay $15,000 and get Adrian here again. But, maybe we do have another quick look a couple of months before the end of the term and say, is there anything we could tweak for the next elected members coming in that might, make it that little bit better? So I hope you'll support this. Thank you.
Councillor Bay, wishing to second?
Yes.
Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, thank you. And just on Councillor Olsen's observation about not getting the consultant back, if we can save 6 consultancies, we can cover that primary production rates issue. The inquiry system, I didn't really have any issues about it, and I still don't, and I don't use it much. Maybe that's why. But I find with a lot of the questions I've got need a sort of a to and fro thing and a degree of immediacy to get a clear understanding of what I don't know. And I find that waiting till the next Tuesday night and being able to talk just directly to directors, just ask a question that I'm not understanding, and usually the answers is there immediately, especially financial issues. Anthony can usually explain something that I don't understand pretty quickly, and it's done. Longer standing issues, I've just approached directors or the CEO personally. I print out the issue with a couple of details and hand the piece of paper over, and able to have a brief chat about my concerns and the background. And I've really no issues at all with the responses. They've all been timely, given the circumstances around the issue that's been raised. So, I'm in the last year or so, I've been particularly happy with the information I've been requesting and receiving. Thank you.
Councillor Eaton.
I was just wondering whether the movers might be, could include, I was referring to 4.3 it is, that talks about the 24-hour response. So what I'd like to have included in that, the staff have actually got my proposal, is that it's at the close of the next working day. So, for example, if I put an EM inquiry in today, staff are supposed to get a response to me by 4 o'clock this Saturday afternoon, if it was a Friday. What this does is allow for weekends and public holidays. Just gives them that time.
Can staff take on that feedback? We don't need to add it to the motion. Councillor de Graaf.
Thank you. I've got a question first and then some debate, please. I did ask a question a while ago about this because Adrian Scull's report said that some elected members were sending their inquiries in via text. And I specifically asked who was that and what were those inquiries about and when did it happen? Have you got some information on that?
Through you, Mayor Thompson. I'm not actually sure where Adrian refers to text messages in the report. If you could tell us that.
Yes, it's in the recommendations. So it's also listed in that page 216 to 220 that our CEO just referred to before. That says that one of recommendations is there, that staff would not take any EM inquiries via text message, and the recommendation is that that should be adopted, that a person cannot put their EM inquiry in via text.
Through you, Mayor Thompson, apparently during one of the staff interviews that information came forward, but as the person charged with overseeing the process of EM inquiry, I personally have never seen an EM inquiry come through as a text.
But it was in the report. So, and I asked the question several months ago and I was told it was going to come back as an answer as part of this report. So is there somebody else that knows about this then? Director Chris Wright told me he was going to answer that question when this all came back here.
As I've previously answered your question, we believe that information about text messages came through a staff interview from Adrian Scull, but as a person who oversees the process, I can say that I've not noticed any EM inquiries come through as text messages.
All right,
if members are aware of actually doing that.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll just leave that as an anomaly. It's in the report. I will just reply to a couple of things that Councillor Olsen said. Like the system's working fantastic now and getting it having, done within 5 days is really fantastic. Having the Mayor's EM inquiries in there as well. Now, the Mayor's EM inquiries were not in there from March in 2019 up to around about September 2021. To me, that is an issue. I'm sorry if that upsets people, but that's an issue. And I think that it probably would be worthwhile if people could actually see what those inquiries were over that period, just for transparency, not to have a personal dig at anybody. I think that, all of our inquiries should be treated the same. And then we can also see who's asking what questions about what. And, they've already asked my question over there. That's great. I don't need to ask it now because I can see they've followed that up already. For example, Councillor Olsen says that the system's working great now. I agree, but this new procedure, all those bits in red, they stand to be massive, dramatic changes that affect the democracy of this council. In my view, potentially they have that, because what it talks about in there is that if an elected member asks a question that's not within scope, or if it's more of a complex or a strategic nature, that question will not be answered well, it may not necessarily, but the director may choose to say, I'm not going to answer that question. You need to go back over to the council and ask them if that's okay to ask your question. And then if they say no, your question will not be answered. So I'll give an example just last week where I sent a question through. It was actually asking about, which sports clubs have been given, how that order is prioritised where, you get a different club, sports club, cricket club has been paid for, their nets have been covered, but another one hasn't. So that was the question asked. And what I got told was, look, this is a complex nature. It's going to take longer to answer. Will take a bit longer to get back to you. That's absolutely fine. Under the new policy, what will happen is if I am told that that's complex, I could very well be told that you need to move that as a motion. So if you want to find that out, you need to take it to the council. I just think that actually goes against the specifications of the Local Government Act. But as I said, I will be watching very closely to see how this pans out. It's got alarm bells all over it for me. It also says in here some things that I find really quite offensive. It says in here, because Adrian Scull report, it didn't actually come up with anything saying that people have directed staff, elected members have criticised people, elected members have asked repeat questions. Didn't say any of that. He didn't say any of that. But in here, it actually says that if you do that, that's considered out of scope, which is totally fine, but it's also implying that that had been happening. We had a review done, and the review didn't say that anything bad was happening with the EM inquiry system. So I have concerns as to why it would be locked down now. So, that's how I feel about it.
Councillor Tonkin.
I need to fess up. Last week I sent a text through with photographs to a staff member who had had a couple of conversations about rubbish in Christie's Creek, and that was then forwarded through the EM session, the EM page.
Councillor Olsen, would you like to close debate? Put the motion to vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Members, a division's been called on our EM inquiry system. Those in favour, please stand. Those in favour, Deputy Mayor McMahon, Councillors Bray, Olsen, Jamieson, Tonkin, Brown, O'Brien, Familiotis and Eaton. Those against, Councillor de Graaf. Members, someone like to move us off to a break? Councillor Familiotis and Eaton, let's come back at 5 to 9. Welcome back, councillors. We'll pick back up.